Thanks a lot for staying with us and welcome to the second half of TVC Breakfast. Let's talk now about gender and sexual-based violence, which is one of the most prevalent human rights violations in the world, affecting individuals regardless of age, culture, or socioeconomic status. And so, in addressing this menace, the Lagos State government established the Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, mandated to provide end-to-end response to domestic and sexual violence, including reporting incidents, as well as providing medical evaluation and care, and conducting preliminary investigations. The Lagos State government is also monitoring and evaluating its progress in addressing SGBV, identifying areas for improvement, and addressing setbacks. So the question at this point now is how responsive the Lagos State's Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency has been in the last decade. We have joining us via Zoom the Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, Titilola Abaibadini. Thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations also to you and your team for attaining 10 years of fighting this cause, talking about combating the SGBV menace. But when you look at the peculiarities of these crimes, because that's what we have seen them to be, and how the state government has been able to walk around these peculiarities and give some level of protection and justice for victims, what would it be for you?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I believe that the data shows that we are gradually breaking the culture of silence. It's important for us to realize that these issues have always been with us. But for so long, they've been shrouded in secrecy. They've been viewed as a taboo. Imagine reporting that a girl's father is sexually abusing her. But with the advent of relevant legislation, with the creation of relevant institutions to respond to this menace, with the demonstration of political will at all levels of government, with the commitment of relevant non-governmental organizations working in the community to ensure that we break the culture of silence, we do believe that we are making progress in this fight.
And we understand that in this part of the world, to an extent, culture and religion plays more role in influencing major issues in the society. So as regards to that, how has this, played, or how does this, affect victims coming forward in that sense?
Definitely. Culture is a main issue, is an important issue. And it's important that we realize that culture in its entirety is not bad. Perhaps sometimes it's the interpretation of particular parts of culture that can encourage the perpetration of gender-based violence. You also have the issue of religion. Religion is very potent. We have survivors. The data shows us that at least 60% of survivors have approached their religious cleric, either an imam or their pastor, to report this issue, especially of domestic violence. And the issue still remains unresolved, hence the need to come to government. So religious clerics, religion itself, the interpretation of the holy books plays a huge role in encouraging or discouraging the perpetration of gender-based violence. And that is why over the years, we have been very strategic in our interventions and engagement with religious clerics and our custodians of culture, traditional rulers. It's important for us to let them see, the need to have interface with government. As a religious cleric, it's not wise that you continue to mediate marital issues for the same couple. This week, the woman comes in with a broken jaw. Next week, she comes in with a black eye. And you keep deploying the Bible says or the Quran says. Religious clerics have to know that there comes a time when they must have interface with government, where such cases must be escalated, because as we always say, every domestic violence case is a potential murder case. And the truth is, nobody really wants blood on their hands. So we agree with you that culture, religion plays a huge role. But aside from the negative impact, we are looking at it from a positive lens. How can we engage these critical stakeholders? How can we make them duty bearers? How can we make sure that, when cases are reported to them, they know when to stop with their intervention and when to have interface and escalate or make referrals to government?
Right. And, okay, so the SGBV of a thing is quite wide because even the men are also recording some numbers of victimization, and then children and women, girls, and all of that. How mindful is Lagos of considering this wide encompassing status of SGBV, and is it that you are focusing on a particular thing, or how are you trying to keep up with all this, the wide nature of this menace?
Thank you. If you look at the law, Protection Against Domestic Violence Law 2015 as amended, Section 18 of the law lists the different forms of domestic violence: physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal, stalking, harassment, forceful ejection from the home, so it's not limited to physical abuse. And that's why when we advocate, when we go to the communities, when we do sensitization, when we build capacity of relevant responder agencies, we remind ourselves that these issues are not limited to physical abuse, And when we do that, we now start to see other kinds of violence apart from physical abuse being reported. Yes, we know that majority of the cases that come to us are actually physical abuse. But we are not oblivious of the fact that a good number of people are experiencing economic abuse. They're experiencing verbal or mental abuse or psychological abuse. And as you rightly said, yes, gender-based violence is not a respecter of age, class, or creed, or gender. Men and women can be victims and survivors. We know that the data shows that it's more prevalent, women are more vulnerable and susceptible to being victims and survivors. The data shows us last year, we provided services to over 3,333 adults. And out of that number, 90% of the reported cases were from women. And we had about 333 from men. Right? So yes, we appreciate that men and women experience violence, but the power dynamics, the forms of violence that are reported cannot be equated. So we look at violence, gender-based violence, leveraging the provisions of the law, knowing fully well that it's not limited to physical abuse, creating opportunities for survivors to be able to report the different forms of violence that they may be experiencing, and more importantly, ensuring that they are able to access support when they report.
And I'm interested in what, the process of handling each case, how peculiar it is from start to finish, especially for those who may want to approach the agency. Does the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency actually, provide support and rehabilitation for some of the survivors, like you call them? And is there a measure or mechanism put in place to ensure deterrence and also accountability on the part of the perpetrator?
Yes, thank you very much. Our statutory mandate, as provided for in the Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency law, provides that we are to ensure holistic support for survivors, holistic support end-to-end, medical, legal, psychosocial support. When necessary, we go in and rescue survivors from precarious situations. Sometimes we have to relocate survivors because the communities are aware and stigma and shame has set in. And then, of course, access to justice. Let's not forget that these are crimes. The fact that it happens in the home, the fact that it's between intimate partners does not negate the fact that it is a criminal offense. Domestic violence, rape, defilement, and they have relevant punitive measures as provided for in the law. So a survivor can call, we have a toll-free line. A survivor can call, a survivor can send us a DM via any of our social media handles. Or a survivor can walk into the office. Or a mandated reporter. In Lagos State, we have mandated reporters. People who see something, say something, and do something. And so we're talking about neighbors, talking about family members, especially when it involves child abuse issues. You have people calling on behalf of the child, giving government information as to the location of where this issue is happening, and government going in, to rescue and rehabilitate. So when we come in post-violence, we look at each case, it's peculiar. Yes, there may be similar indices or similar factors, but there's no one case that is similar, that is the same as the other. We are survivor-centered. It's not the rhetoric. We are actually survivor-centered. We come up with a case plan in partnership with the survivor. The survivor is at the heart of our operations. A particular survivor may need to be removed and placed in a home. We have a shelter. We have NGOs that also provide that service. Survivor may need to have access to legal representation because they want to perhaps gain or keep custody of the children. They may also want the father of the children, to provide maintenance and support towards the welfare, education, and healthcare of the children. So that's where you need legal representation. We have in-house lawyers, we have Office of the Public Defender, we have the Lagos Public Interest Law Partnership, and also other NGOs, FIDA, AULA, that provide, free legal representation for such people. Medical assistance in case of sexual violence. Again, we are survivor-centered. Yes, it's important for us to apprehend the suspect, but it's more important for us to ensure that the survivor is able to access quick medical services and intervention. And that's where that led to the creation of designated health facilities in Lagos State, sexual assault referral centers, comprehensive primary healthcare centers, general hospitals that have been upgraded to be able to provide sexual assault management services to survivors at no cost. So that's another way of ensuring survivors are able to access support post-trauma. Then empowerment. We do advocacy, we say survivors should break the culture of silence. Then what? Let's not forget that a good number of survivors are financially dependent on their abusers. And that's one of the major reasons why survivors, especially of domestic violence, do not leave abusive relationships. Not because they are enjoying the abuse, but because of that system, that support structure that they don't have to stand on their own once they decide to break the culture of silence. And that's where, robust empowerment mechanisms come in. Ministry of Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, Ministry of Wealth Creation, Office of Civic Engagement, and of course, the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Trust Fund, which provides access to grants to high-risk survivors for the purpose of accommodation, setting up businesses, or scaling up of existing businesses. And in certain instances, we have to even provide financial support towards medical intervention. We had a case of a lady, her husband had used a hammer on her right knee, and she had lost function of that right knee. We had to make payments to the hospital because she has started undergoing physiotherapy. In terms of ensuring perpetrators are held accountable, we agree with you that one of the major ways we can reverse this ugly trend is by ensuring that perpetrators are held accountable, ending the culture of impunity. And that speaks to ensuring that, we get and we secure convictions.
Right.
And in the past 1 year, the state government has secured over 50 convictions, ranging from life imprisonment to 25 years, 65 years, depending on the evidence that is adduced before the court. So the wheel of justice is turning. It may not be turning as fast as we all want it to turn, but it is turning. And if you do the crime, you will do the time.
Thank you for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. We've been speaking with Titi Lola Adeni, who heads the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency. And of course, it's 10 years now since this agency, which was formerly a team before, was established by the state government. And there's a fresh call for action as the agency moves forth in combating drastically this ugly trend. You spoke earlier, and thank you very much for holding on. You spoke earlier about the number of convictions that the state has recovered, in its bid to bring perpetrators to account. And, every time we hear of convictions, we also hear the judge going on to say that the name of that perpetrator be added to the sex register. Tell us some more about that and how far, what's the value of that in this fight?
Yes, the concept of a sex offenders register is basically to assist in monitoring sex convicts, but more importantly, to serve as a safer recruitment mechanism, especially for institutions that, have interface with children, schools, any institution basically that has interface with children. It's important that when you're recruiting, you don't unknowingly recruit the services of a janitor who has been convicted. And so part of what the sex offenders register is doing is to support safer recruitment procedures. Between last year and this year, we've had 36 applications in institutions that have requested to conduct background searches for intending employees. They want to know if this person has been convicted for any sexual offense related matter. And that's part of the essence of the sex offenders register. Another reason why it's so important is because it serves as a reminder that there are consequences for actions. And it shifts the focus and the spotlight off the survivor onto the perpetrator, who is now a convict. And so part of what we do once we secure a conviction and we wait for the time frame for the convict to exercise his or her right of appeal, which is typically 3 months, the law allows us to write letters of advisory to the local government and the traditional ruler and the community leader of the location where the convict was previously residing in. We publish the details, we do a poster with the person's picture, the details, and do a letter saying that this person that used to previously reside in your community has been convicted by a court of law and is currently serving time, in the custodial facility. And these posters are pasted in conspicuous places in the local government secretariats and the palaces so that people see, it's a mindset issue. People see that perpetrators are being held accountable. That is one of the ways in ending the culture of impunity.
All right, talking about what you just said, that it's a mindset issue. You mentioned earlier that gender, sexual-based violence is beyond being physical. It could be mental, it could be economically. But are there, policies or laws put in place by the agency to address emerging issues like online domestic violence?
Yes, cyberbullying, revenge porn, threatening to leak the nudes of an intimate partner. It is an emerging trend. I believe this year alone, we've received 27 of such cases. And, talking about it, it may not communicate the danger or the impact this can have. Imagine a person being told that if you do not pay a certain amount of money, I will leak your nudes, or if you do not come to my house and, engage in sexual activity, I would leak your nudes. We actually had a survivor that attempted to commit suicide because this was about, she felt that her ex would, eventually carry out that threat. So it is an issue. We also have a section in the criminal law that we go under to ensure that, once this is reported, the police has a relevant section to use to investigate and then charge such a person to court.
Right. So what is the thrust of, activities to mark your 10 years of doing this work? I'm talking about the GSBV. I know this week there was a symposium, and we're entering the awareness month, if I understand correctly. But tell us more about what more you want to do and what the future will be like.
So ultimately, the essence of the awareness month and designating a whole month is not enough. I think every day we should do this every day, because it's every day people are experiencing this vicious menace. But designating, the Lagos State government deciding to designate a whole month is to just, intensify our efforts in breaking the culture of silence, heightening awareness about these issues, going to the grassroots to engage with the community. You spoke of the symposium which we convened earlier on in the week. It's an opportunity to reflect. How far have we come? What are the issues? What are the teaching issues? How can we leverage science, for instance? How can we do more with DNA to link suspects to the crime or even exonerate suspects, right? What are the issues with investigation, with prosecution? Are there barriers to accessing health services? So it was important for us to have that stakeholder meeting to interrogate these issues. What are we doing right? What are we doing that perhaps we should do less of? And how can we forge a path for the next 10 years? And so at the end of that symposium, we've come up with a communique which will be disseminated across our relevant stakeholders, which we hope will guide and drive our interventions in the next decade. But aside from the symposium, we have different activities. Some we've already done, some are still ongoing. This whole week was devoted to the Safeguarding and Child Protection Week. So far, we've engaged over 3,000 students on these issues because children have a role to play in their protection. So we engage them, child-appropriate language, letting them know, body parts, boundaries, informing them about the concept of grooming, how to speak up and how to disclose abuse to their parents or a trusted adult, distributing flagship booklets, My Passport of Rights, textbooks, just ultimately reinforcing and creating that awareness amongst the children so that they can disclose abuse in the unfortunate instance that it occurs. Tomorrow, we're going to the slum. On Sunday, we're going to the churches and the mosques to engage again with children and their caregivers on these critical issues. Next week, we have a symposium for survivors. It's tagged our stories to tell. Post-trauma, post-violence, how are you coping? We're talking about financial resilience. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about, the rights of a woman,
Right.
A married woman, for instance, that has left the abuse or left her abusive partner. Do you have rights? Can you make demands? Does the
Right.
law allow you to make demands? So
Right.
we're going to have that as well.
All right, we've run out of time, but we must thank you very much, Titilola Vaiva-Adini of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency. We thank you very much for your contributions on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.